All right, round 3 is ready to go. That timed out very well. So let's go ahead and go down to round 3. I don't know the players or the deck list. Here we go. Theodore Jung versus Sam Kuprewicz. Azorius Hammer versus Living End. Okay, let's get it started.
Pull up deck list here, round 3. There we go. I don't know if you noticed this, but for Samuel or Sam, if you look at the deck list in Melee, it says 8 rack, and definitely not an 8 rack deck. So
Jerk. Yeah, clearly not. Man, these players, they're just running all over us with these deck names month after month. We need to start handing out disqualifications for submitting the wrong deck list name. That'll teach them. Not that I have any influence over judge penalties, because if I did, things would be a lot different, let me tell you.
So this matchup is pretty interesting. We haven't seen a ton of Hammer on camera over the past couple of events, at least the ones that I remember. And I would say for the most part that Living End is in a decent spot in this matchup if Violent Outburst is drawn, because Violent Outburst is kind of an instant speed way to kind of wrath the board. But Theodore does specifically have a potent card in this matchup, which is Inkmoth Nexus. So you can see potentially where if Sam goes for a Shardless Agent on turn 3 and Theodore has an Inkmoth Nexus already on the battlefield with the hammer rolled up, Theodore might just be able to kill kill Sam on the spot. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, certainly a possibility. All right, so Giver of Runes just gets in for 1. Stoneforge Mystic follow up. Yeah, it's not going to be any counters for creatures, I guess. There could be subtlety in some cases, but Hammer is tutored up, and Sam will just develop the graveyard. And I feel like part of the reason why Zoe Riederman had some struggles in round 1 was there just wasn't time, or the cards weren't drawn correctly to load up the graveyard. So the Living Ends were just not like premium put, like we said, put 20 power creatures on the board. They were much smaller. Here is the Violent Outburst in hand. There is no red mana.
No red, but probably a Shardless.
Yeah. There you go.
And yeah, this is kind of exactly what we were talking about. It's Shardless versus Violent Outburst. Now, the one thing I will say is Sam does have a flying creature in the graveyard. You'll notice that Curator of Mysteries. So, let's say if Curator was, say, an Architects of Will, and Sam's board was, Architects plus Waker of Waves plus Grief, maybe that Theodore could have, some sort of setup with, like, Sigarda's Aid or something along those lines. But that flying creature is going to be able to prevent the Nexus. And, we got here.
Well, with this Grief coming back, and so the Hammer, which was picked up, looks like Kaldra Compleat, Stoneforge Mystic, and a pair of land. I feel like there's reason to take the Stoneforge Mystic as it's the only creature, but what do you think? Okay, it looks like it's going to be the Hammer.
The Stoneforge also represents another hammer, but the thing is, it's a lot slower.
Yeah.
And I think Sam is okay with Theodore just deploying the Stoneforge this turn, because it might be a little bit too slow for what Sam has, because Sam effectively has a 2-turn clock, right? We have 7, 10, 14, 16 power. I mean, honestly, if Sam draws a red source, this might be a 1-turn clock, because we saw that outburst.
That's true. Theodore does have Inkmoth Nexus as a potential blocker, but that's not really a blocker, because that's not a game-winning block. That's just a delaying the inevitable. So here is the Stoneforge. Here is another hammer.
Yeah, we'll see if Theodore picked up a Sigarda's Aid. That would be his best possible draw. Got a Giver, okay. Which is still not too bad, because you could maybe see, if Theodore does pick up a Sigarda's Aid, I guess he's going to be a little bit choked on mana, because we don't have enough to play Sigarda's Aid, activate the Inkmoth, and play the Hammer, because we need 4 mana total to do that, including the Inkmoth. So he might be a mana short of that.
And Sam Kuprewicz is going to respect the possibility, and or at least contemplating it, as that Curator is at least thinking about not attacking here.
Right, so you kind of have to weigh, if Theodore decides to chump block with the Stoneforge Mystic on the Waker, you take 6 damage, go to 12, and then Theodore would have another chump block next turn, in which case he's only taking 10. So if you don't attack with the Curator this turn, you're essentially allowing you're turning your potential 2-turn clock into a 3-turn clock. However, if you do attack with everything, the Curator is tapped, and then you potentially can lose to land, Sigarda's Aid, attack with Inkmoth, right?
Right.
So Sam's trying to weigh that. Now, the thing is, Theodore could also just take all of the damage, go to 2, and then have the Giver to protect, basically to protect the what do you call it? The Inkmoth from the Curator, if there were a Curator back to block. So
yeah, and that's kind of why I like the Curator attacking, because the Giver allows evasion anyway, so there may not be much benefit to holding back one color creature. You have to hold back 2 colors, and then you're just not doing enough. So instead, everything goes in. Giver of Runes chump blocks. And
yeah, depending. Oh, Sam has a Force Negation. Okay, yeah, so probably has this one wrapped up with the Force Negation, because even if Theodore does have land plus aid plus hammer, we can just force the hammer and kind of move on.
Mm-hmm. Sam actually had 8, so the Nexus isn't even required.
Oh, that's a very good point. We took a lot of damage.
Yeah. I'm not sure what went to the graveyard. Is that Horizon Land?
Yeah, Horizon Canopy.
Okay. All right. And that is going to do it. Oh, and the life total just changed. Sam actually at 17, perhaps. So that's significant difference. But yeah, Sam Kuprewicz takes down game 1. Let's go ahead and put the deck list up, as I don't believe we had a chance to do that before the match. So we'll see the intricacies of what's actually going on. And if you're sitting at home and want to copy the deck list, well, here you go. Theodore Jung's Azorius Hammer. Also, deck list will be available on MTG Melee, I believe, tomorrow. Once the deck lists are not open during the Swiss, but once we get to the elimination rounds or tomorrow morning, they should all be available on Melee. If you go to the Energy Series page or just find the event specifically, you'll be able to find what everyone played.
Right, so from Theodore's side, what are we looking at against Living End? So Hushbringer, potentially good against Foundation Breaker, but it's pretty narrow in that regard. Lavinia's excellent, stops Forces being cast, stops Living End being cast, as well as Grief, so that's a slam dunk. Sanctifier, don't think hits enough. Teferi's excellent. March, don't really want spot removal. Spell Pierce, Mana Leak, love it, and then Relic as well. So Theodore's got some good stuff here.
Yeah, Mana Leak is a card that is... just to my eye, jumps out as being an unusual sideboard card, even though it makes sense because it's generically good enough. It's not specific against any, one archetype or matchup. And you often see things that are more powerful in sideboards like Ether Gust or Flusterstorm, but Mana Leak could get the job done here, no problem. Okay, the players are sideboarding, getting things ready to go. Let's look at Sam Kuprewicz's Living End deck.
All right, so what are we looking at from Sam's point of view? So we got Brazen Borrower, which is some decent-ish interaction. The only thing I will mention about Borrower is you can't bounce an Inkmoth with it, so you got to be careful. Foundation Breaker, Slam Dunk, Force of Vigor, Slam Dunk, and then don't think we want to touch Ley Lines or Disputes. So yeah, that's pretty much it from Sam's side.
Okay, so we'll see how things play out in the rest of this match. The players are shuffling up. Azorius Hammer versus Living End. So you said basically you feel like Violent, and all things being equal, Violent Outburst plays a big role. Shardless Agent may not always be enough, but the instant speed sweeper ability of Violent Outburst can put it over the top. Sam was able to take down game 1 with just a very large board. That wasn't a small Living End. That was an overwhelming one. And Theodore
right, and like you mentioned, when we saw Zoe play Living End, she didn't really have a lot of early cyclers, and that's kind of the big difference there. Sam was able to put enough power into play to make it effectively a 2-turn clock, regardless of how many blockers Theodore had. So yeah, definitely what Sam's looking to do.
All right, round 3 of 9 of the Swiss. So there are people who talk about, I just think about one match at a time, one game at a time. I'm not one of those people. I wish I was, but I'm not. A 9-round event, probably once you get to around like round 4 or 5, you start thinking like, okay, I just have to win this many more to make top 8 or do achieve whatever. What's your level of unease or confidence or just general attitude playing through a long tournament? How does it feel to you going through like a 9-round Swiss event?
Hey, you just gotta take it one round at a time.
Oh,
You don't really like to. I know. You don't really like to think about the stuff that you really can't control. What you can control is the match at hand, right? You want to
mhm.
make sure you're focusing and playing that specific match to the best of your ability. But you can't really control like what breakers are going to look like in round 8. Can I draw things like that? So it's pretty much just I like to I control what I can control, and then just kind of that is what it is. So.
I hate people like you. I mean, that's obviously the best mental approach, but some of us aren't capable of that. You win 2 rounds in a 9-round event, you're like, all right, I only need 5 more in a draw, and then I need, this over to happen, this 2 people to get disqualified, and I'm in. But no, the peaceful, serene approach, very something I envy among those of you that can do that. All right, both players. I don't know if we're still shuffling or if we're both on our way to 6, but momentarily we'll have game 2 going, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think I saw them both look at a hand, so I think we're both on 6. And going back to what you said about the mental gymnastics, as it were, about long tournaments. I remember the first. I kind of had something similar to that. The first Pro Tour that I played, where it's always. I think I went 6-2 day 1, and especially like you're going, going into day number 2, going to sleep, and you're like, man, it just that thought it kind of sinks into your head when you're playing like those 2-day tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, I don't need that much to win. I just need to whatever X2 or something to go to the next PT or something like that. So,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely, my first Pro Tour, I had that experience, but over time, I tend to just kind of stop thinking about that stuff.
Well, bully for you. Yeah. All right. So both players on 6 potentially. It looks like Sam is keeping. Theodore is keeping. All right. 6 cards apiece. Fair game. We shall see. All right. Drum starting off for Theodore, but no 0-mana creature to go alongside it. And I guess even if there was
Very,
one, yeah.
a very unexciting, unexciting hand. And this is kind of exactly what I was thinking. With Theodore keeping kind of this. I mean, Theodore's already on 6, but I was going to say Theodore probably has at least 2 kind of quote unquote heat pieces, and you see the Lavinia and the Spell Pierce. So.
Right. And we do not see a second land. But this is a pretty good hand if a land is drawn. Even despite the fact that Sam's going to strip away whatever he thinks the biggest threat is. And that's actually not clear to me what's going to be taken here either.
Yeah, Theodore's hand is basically it's really good against Grief because you have 2 combo interaction or 2 living and interactive spells with the Lavinia and the Pierce, and then you have 2 combo pieces of your own. So we like to see, we kind of use that phrase good against Thoughtseize, and this is kind of where that hand is. Like you said, if Theodore does find a land, Stoneforge, oh no, we took Lavinia, which does make sense. I think that's probably the highest impact one because it stops the most out of Sam's deck. It stops all the forces, future griefs, and it stops living in. Whereas Spell Pierce is more targeted, where it doesn't stop, griefs. You could play around Spell Pierce with the force negations by just having mana. So it's really only specifically targeting the living in. So that does make sense to me.
Okay. Is there a land or a 0-mana creature?
It was a Sentinel.
No, yeah, there's neither. Sentinel, that works. I mean, that turns on Spell Pierce for the moment. And actually, okay. Theodore's going to give it some thought, maybe.
Yeah, he's
Is it?
debating on Sigarda's Aid versus Hold Up Pierce. Now, because you're on one land, and yeah, I like this play a lot. Because you're on one land, you have the potential to just top deck a Colossus Hammer and kind of go in. And also, you're not too worried about anything spell pierceable this turn because this
Right.
is not, this isn't the turn where Sam has 3 mana. So I like that play a lot.
Yep. Me too. Okay. So Sam does have a second land. That was to be expected. And now Theodore's going to have to think. I mean, we know there's a Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah. You noticed, okay, so this is, I'm assuming this is still Theodore's main phase, right? I don't think we've passed yet. Okay. I think he drew a Stoneforge, so he's kind of debating, does he want to tap out for Stoneforge or hold up Spell Pierce? Pretty tough spot for Theodore, for sure.
Yeah, I
I mean, if you tap out for Stoneforge and a living end hits the battlefield, you basically just lose, because then,
Right.
well, I guess that's not true, because Lavinia comes back, and then you still have the Sigarda's Aid in play, but I guess the Grief comes back, takes the Colossus Hammer, so yeah, I guess you kind of have to hold it up here.
Yeah, I like holding it up also. I mean, getting it for 1 doesn't do much, but you're going to draw a land eventually. You have to hope. But now that you didn't play the first turn, I feel like you
can't play it this turn.
Right.
No.
You had now you're stuck.
You have to commit.
Yeah. So I mean, he's thinking about it, but yeah, now if you play Stoneforge, it feels pretty bad. So okay, Sentinel gets in for 1, and yeah, pass the turn.
And the worst part about all of this too is because it is Spell Pierce and Sam knows about it, he's just going to play 5 lands. So if Theodore misses another turn or two and Sam just gets to 5 mana, then the living end's going to happen.
Yeah, that is the unfortunate reality of things for Theodore, but I mean, it's easy to regret your decision, but his original decision made sense. So this is just, the less desirable outcome of not hitting your land drop immediately. Even a 0 mana creature would, well, I guess no, that wouldn't help. Yeah, it really needs to be an actual mana source.
Second Otawara, I think. Yeah, so we're working with Borrower, Outburst, 2 Otawaras, and a Breeding Pool, I believe. So I guess Sam's debating on whether or not he wants to shock in the Breeding Pool to hold up Otawara. At 15, I feel like with Theodore not having a ton of pressure in play, I think the 2 life is probably pretty marginal. But okay, I think Theodore picked up a Colossus Hammer. So, yeah, I guess your Spell Pierce really isn't that good anymore. This is a really rough spot. I was going to say you can pass, and you can hold up... Okay, he's going to jam now. You could pass and hold up the Colossus Hammer and the Spell Pierce, but your Spell Pierce isn't good if Sam just plays land 5, so yeah, Theodore's in a really rough spot here.
All right, so it's another Springleaf Drum.
Oh, it wasn't a hammer, it was a drum. Okay, that's much worse.
Yeah, that is... It's pretty minor, but I think I would have preferred casting the drum off of the first drum plus Sentinel and leaving the land untapped.
Yeah.
But
Agreed.
That's okay. Okay,
Wow.
This isn't a downside I was necessarily expecting, but this is a significant downside to the choice that was made there for Theodore.
Not that it mattered too much, because Sam could have just paid for the Spell Pierce anyways, but yeah, it is definitely a downside for sure.
It's actually kind of an odd interaction. From Sam's perspective, you're bouncing a creature that was going to die to the living end.
Yeah, which is why you see Theodore not even fight over it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could have Spell Pierce the Borrower there, but then the downside is, not only does it keep the Sentinel in play, which you'd rather have it not in play anyways, because it's got that living end, it also puts the Borrower in the graveyard, which is worse if we do cast living end. So
yeah. All right, so plenty of mana for Sam Kuprewicz here.
Definitely like main phasing it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think we're gonna get back, what was it, 2 Street Wraiths and the Grief. Yeah, okay.
That's pretty sizable, and that's exactly half of Theodore's life total. We're looking at
a triple
Sentinel.
Mystic.
Wow.
I think it's at least 2, right? I think it's triple Mystic.
Well, okay, we're probably not choosing that.
No.
And the other cards aren't even that exciting. The Lavinia does come back into play, so Sam. Well, no, I was going to say Sam was going to have to win with this board, but that's not even true. As you said, there's a pair of Otawaras in hand, so this Lavinia can be dealt with.
Right.
And that's asking, that's after Theodore deals with Sam's board, which is not at all clear that even can happen.
Okay. So we can Stoneforge, and then we have the drum to cast the hammer. So hypothetically, we could block with Stoneforge. After blocks are declared, tap the drum, tap the Stoneforge file, or cast the hammer. and then probably eat one of the Street Wraiths, take 6, go to 12, and then we have a hammer on a Stoneforge Mystic, which is not a bad spot to be in, but again, with double Otawara, that's going to be rough for Theodore.
Yeah. What you just went through absolutely makes sense from Theodore's perspective. And we know it's not going to work at all, but he's not working with as much information as we are, and that does seem like a viable plan to get himself through the next few turns. And it's Sam. I mean, Sam is aware of all this information. So actually, Theodore's the only person in the world who's involved in this match and doesn't know everything. As everyone at home and Sam knows all the rest of it. So Sam should be able to predict what's going to happen here as you did, and it's going to lead to a fairly good board position for Sam.
Oh yeah, even very heads up play. Bounce the Sigarda's Aid, hammer resolves, no target.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Sigarda's Aid's not in play anymore, so then you also lose the Stoneforge Mystic. Yeah, that was very good sequencing from Sam.
Yeah, and Theodore is very short on mana, so it's not exactly trivial to get that Sigarda's Aid back on play. Although I think a Flood Strand was finally drawn for the turn.
Yeah, a little late to the party, I would say. Yeah, just clogged up on these Stoneforge Mystics.
So there are 2 fetch lands in play for Sam.
Mm-hmm.
Is there? Oh, I was thinking there's more hammers in hand, but it's not. It's more Stoneforges. So yeah, that's not very.
Theo only has 12, right? We can go land, Stoneforge Mystic, get a hammer, tap the Stoneforge and the drum, hammer the Lavinia, but it's only 12.
Yeah.
Now, granted, Sam doesn't have lethal on the crackback necessarily. We only have 9 damage. So if there's something that Theodore can maybe dodge a violent outburst, can buy an extra turn here. But I have to imagine that we're just gonna put Sam to 1. I don't see any other really any other lines.
All right, so there is Stoneforge. I mean, this is pretty good. Like anytime you can shut off. Actually, so I was thinking ahead to myself. Well, this is just going to get blown up like the other Otawara. The other Otawara will be shut off because Sam doesn't have a. No, I take it back. He has 4
lands.
Yeah,
we
he's
get
4
4
lands
lands.
already, so that's not going to do anything. All right. Yep. Sam Kuprewicz, I was trying to get excited for you here.
All right, we have to replay the Sigarda's Aid. Okay, never mind. But the Sigarda's Aid's not in play anymore, so we actually can't attack here. Right.
Okay.
But we can do the same thing we did last turn, but again, another Otawara. So that's not going to work out.
Yeah. I got 3 steps ahead of myself there in multiple different paths, and none of them were actually realistic. So as
you and me both.
Yeah, as it currently stands, Sam Kuprewicz cannot resolve a living end. However, he probably doesn't need to. The Otawara remaining hand plus the attackers should keep things safe.
Yeah, so we're probably going to see the same thing as last turn, where Sam goes to attack with everything. Stoneforge blocks the Street Wraith before damage, flash and hammer. Then Sam responds, exact same thing, bounce the Sigarda's Aid, Stoneforge dies. Now, Sam is at 13, so even if Theodore can set up land plus Sigarda's Aid plus Stoneforge plus hammer, it's not enough to kill because that's only 12 damage from the Lavinia. So Sam could just take 12, go to 1, and have lethal in the crackback.
Okay, well, change of plans. Here is a Foundation Breaker.
This works too, because you can force the action, target the Sigarda's Aid. And now the cool thing about this line is if Theodore casts the Colossus Hammer in response, it's on a tapped blocker, because the Stoneforge has to be tapped for the Springleaf Drum. So that's a pretty good heads-up play, and you can still fetch 2 basics to hold up Otawara. So yeah, this is good sequencing from Sam here.
All right, so Theodore will contemplate how to recover this position.
I imagine if you're Theodore, you kind of just have to jam the hammer, right? Because if you don't have another Sigarda's Aid in hand, so yeah, you kind of just have to jam it here. So I think what Sam's going to do is let this happen, see what gets equipped, right? And then have the Otawara to bounce whatever gets equipped.
Right. Well, in that case, Theodore's probably incentivized to put the hammer on the Stoneforge Mystic because he'd rather have that bounce than Lavinia.
Right. And if Sam does double fetch, 11 is still lethal with the Stoneforge, right? Because it's 11. So yeah.
Okay, it goes on Lavinia. All right. Breaker kills that Sigarda's aid, like we were saying. And Sam, maybe a little uncertain if the full attack is warranted here.
Yeah, he's potentially worried about another Colossus Hammer. But if you attack with everything, oh yeah, I guess you would, because you're forced to Otawara the Lavinia, and then Theodore would just be able to go if Sigarda's 8 plus hammer on the Stoneforge. That's exactly lethal because you have to fetch twice.
That's asking a lot, though.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, 6 does come across here. Theodore drops to 5.
Yeah, Paladin too, because Paladin would just be able to go. Theodore could just go Paladin and then equip the unequip the Colossus Hammer, attack with both, and then even if Sam fetches 2 basics to bounce Lavinia, again, still 11.
All right, so Flood Strand was the draw again for Theodore for the second turn in a row. Here is Stoneforge Mystic. So this is all the stuff Theodore was hoping to be doing on turn. What's up?
We have enough mana because we have the 2 drums. Oh, but never mind, the Otawara. All right, never mind. I thought we had something going on, but I forgot about the Otawara.
Right. All right, so here's double fetch.
It's gonna make him show 2 fetchables.
Well, given that he's actually able to take as much damage as he needs to, I don't think that'll be a problem.
Yep.
And that will complete. So yeah, Theodore had the tools, just the mana meant that it was all happening, a couple turns later than he would have liked. And Sam Kuprewicz does take that one down. Okay, so Sam Kuprewicz advances to 3-0. Still a lot of work left to do. Unclear whether he's thinking, I just won round 3, or if he's thinking, I've got 6 rounds left, depending on what kind of personality type he is. We are going to move into the round 3 backup match, I imagine.
Yeah, let's see who we got. Well, Decklist, if we still have that available.
So if we have Decklist available for that, we can go. Or if we have the match ready to roll, we can do that. We are breaking in a new trainee director this round. So, we'll see. Maybe we'll have an unexpected commercial break.
I think I heard word we're switching. Yes,
there we go.
Okay.
All right, here we go. So we are going. Okay, I see so Will Krueger versus Mason Lange. I see the pips on the game scores. I believe that's a relic of the previous screen that will be cleaned up. So I believe this is actually game 1 on a accelerated replay so that we have time to get it all in.
Yeah, this matchup is generally, I would say, favored for the Yawgmoth player, assuming that Yawgmoth can actually hit the battlefield, because the Hammer deck doesn't have a ton of play against it. You know, if you have Yawgmoth plus any number of creatures, can just break up a Hammer pretty easily. But this is kind of a draw from Will that is exceptional against specifically Yawgmoth, because you have the Stoneforge to present the Kaldra as well as the Hammer, which are both larger creatures that won't necessarily just get eaten up by the Yawgmoth.
Okay, so here's Eldritch Evolution, tutoring up Yawgmoth, and, things are cooking for Mason. Attack in for 3 on Will Krueger's side. Looks like we have Stoneforge Mystic, Gingerbrute, couple including a Saga and an Ornithopter with a drum. So a little bit of everything going on here. No ways to cheat equipment yet. And Mason will trade off 2 creatures for the Stoneforge Mystic to start with.
Which makes sense because you know about the Kaldra.
I guess he also benefits 2 cards in the exchange, so pretty good deal.
Right.
Yeah, these Yawgmoth decks are impressive. Except when they're just flooding the board with young wolves.
Undying Creature Tribal. But yeah, once Yawgmoth is in play with the Undying Creatures, it's just, again, it's really, really hard to... I mean, Will does have double Saga, so maybe I spoke too soon, but it's really hard to, like, actually amass a battlefield of, especially because most of Will's creatures are so small. Gingerbrute and Stoneforge Mystic, all that kind of stuff, so...
Okay, well, Mason access to plenty of Yawgmoths this game.
Yawgmoth flooded, as it were.
Mm-hmm. All right, so another Eldritch Evolution on the wall roots this time. And there is a Giralf's Messenger, which is going to skew the life totals rather significantly. And with a second Undying creature, Mason can now activate as many times as he pleases.
Now, I'm always bad at math here. Now, I because Mason is at 3 lower life than Will, I don't know if it's 100% lethal. I can't remember.
All right,
It's
so
the one part of the Yawgmoth deck that I'm not the best at.
so Giralf's Messenger dings Will for it's 2 life, right?
Yes, 2 life each
Okay.
time. Yeah,
So
chat's saying it's not lethal, which I think it's not quite lethal.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of an awkward spot, especially because this token is big enough to take out the Yawgmoth. Now, obviously, we can sacrifice the Jarl's Messenger to make the token smaller. Yep. So
All right, so that leaves 3 artifacts on the board.
yeah, 3/3. Now with Will taking 3, I believe now it's lethal because I think if there's an even life total, I believe that it should. Oh no, because both creatures have a counter on them. Okay, never mind. Yeah, because now if you sacrifice the Undying creature to put a counter on the other one,
Right.
you lose the Undying creature, so you don't have the loop set up.
Right. Right. So that was fairly costly for Mason as
Right.
far as what uh okay.
And also very heads up from Will to note,
Mhm.
recognize the situation.
Yeah. But certainly Mason is not under a ton of pressure anymore. And I believe there's a grist in hand, which does a good job of continuing to exert dominance over the battlefield. So it'll be Yawgmoth not running at full capacity versus some Urza Sagas from Will Krueger. Yeah, this isn't over yet.
No, it's not. And as we talked about, the Urza Saga is one of the better. Wait, okay, now I'm confused. Oh, we're discarding. I was like, wait.
Yeah, we're proliferating.
Oh, that's actually something cool that I have not seen before. Proliferating on the Saga. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it definitely crosses up the mana development somewhat. Will get to tutor off of the chapter 3 saga that just went to the graveyard. And yeah, okay, so he'll also lose the ability to make one of the constructs because obviously chapter 2 is just reached on the saga that's still in play and there's no mana available.
Right. Yep. So he'll only get to make one construct off of this if Will wants to use his mana in that manner. Which it looks like we're not. We're just gonna float mana. Yeah, weird interaction there where proliferate on the saga. It does kill the saga because it accelerates the process, but you still get the 3rd chapter.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
wow. Yeah, and this is just game. Well, not game, but it's pretty close. 11. Oh no, it's just game, right?
It
10.
is game.
Definitely game now. Wow.
Game.
Very,
Yeah,
very heads up. I will.
yeah, Will Krueger wipes out Mason Lange all at once. That turned quickly.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go ahead and I just heard something. I missed whatever was just said, but we'll go to Decklist if we have them. If not, and we just roll game 2, that's fine. if we're moving to live. You know what? Whatever we're doing is fine. Okay, we got game 2. Let's go ahead and go with game 2.
Going into game 2. And yeah, Will played that very, very well.
Yeah, that was very smooth. I mean, Will Krueger is obviously a very experienced player, was the Energy Series MVP last year, won a very significant Mox event over the summer with, I think it was Cube Draft and Modern. And he played, he went undefeated in the Cube portion and then won overall with in Modern with a Titan Shift deck. So congratulations to him for that.
So we got some mulligans here. I believe Mason's on 5. I think Will's on 5. I think they're both on 5. I believe so.
I didn't notice this about myself until recently, but apparently I play a lot of decks that mulligan a ton. Because I played Tron in Modern. Okay, sure, obviously. But then I've been playing Lotus Field in Pioneer, and that deck also mulligans a lot.
Yes.
It can be frustrating at times, but you're obviously getting what you pay for because you do have some powerful interactions of your lands when they work.
Right, it's when you're playing a deck that has lands that tap for 3 mana, you notice the mulligans are a little less painful because your lands are essentially worth more than 1 card when you actually, establish the mana base.
Yeah, that is indeed how it works. All right, so game number 2, we have a double Hierarch start for Mason, a Yawgmoth, and a Grist.
Yeah, that was a Grist rough sequence. Will went for the just jammed for the turn 2 hammer, and Mason did punish him with the Grist minus sack the Yawgmoth. So we got some more Undying creatures. Make a token. Yeah, see, this is one of those games where because Will doesn't have a Saga going, and I mean, as obviously his mana screw too, but if Yawgmoth hits the battlefield, I don't really see a way out for Will.
Mm-hmm. Until that time, I mean, this is raceable, I suppose, if you manage to get up into the air. I guess that's the only realistic way to do that is with the Inkmoth Nexus reanimating after Colossus Hammer.
Right.
There's no ground creatures that aren't green, so flying isn't even necessary, I guess. Giver Runes can protect something. Will's given this some thought. Not a lot to work with here. 1 mana source.
Yeah, just gonna pass. I would have to imagine with either Will's just posturing or maybe has another Colossus Hammer in hand and just wanted to see if it's worth hammering up the Giver. Decides that it's not. Makes sense because the Grist would just be able to take it out. So
yeah, there it is. So blocking happens. Yawgmoth dies. Well, it does draw a Silent Clearing, I think. That would.
So with Mason at 10, yeah. See, the problem is those Noble Hire. There's just too many chump blockers.
Yeah.
I was gonna say with maybe if Will has something like a Shadowspear, can maybe help get through, but doesn't have the Shadowspear. So
No, I'm clearly wrong. It wasn't a Silent Clearing or any sort of mana source at all.
it was a white guard. So I can pull up Will's deck list. It looks like not a very. I wanted to see if Will. Yeah, I think it might have been Blacksmith skill because Will does have 2 copies of that. So
Okay. All right. Attack inbound here for what looks like 6 damage, and then Mason is ready to pull the trigger on Grist post combat. Stoneforge bites it. Yawgmoth stays in play, just gets bigger, and Mason wins game 2 without much trouble. So these hammer decks, we had a couple this round that were on 1 land for just a little too long to really be competitive.
right, yeah, the deck definitely can operate on 1 land, but with specifically against the fast start of just the amount of permanents that the Yawgmoth deck was able to put into play that game, it just Will really needed to find that second land so he could double spell because his opponent was basically double spelling every turn. So
yeah, these Yawgmoth decks, I mean, they have the capability of going wide and overwhelming like we just saw, but I don't feel like that's the more common way to see them end games. All right, game 3 is up and ready. So here it is. Will Krueger versus Mason Lange. This is the round 3 backup match. Will Krueger on the play. Let's see
I
it.
will say I'm a big fan of Will's basic land choice, so props to
I
Will.
mean, the border, I feel like could stand the argument, but yeah, I've no problem with the artwork.
Got a Yawgmoth on Pithing Needle. Definitely makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. So the other options in this deck would be Grist and maybe that's it. I guess lands maybe, but yeah, Yawgmoth is obviously a important factor. There is the Grist.
Now the question is, do we trade the Hierarch for the Paladin? The one downside to not doing that is if Will has the Shadowspear rolled up, you could see something like Hammer plus Shadowspear equip. So I kind of like this trade, especially if Mason has more mana sources in hand where he doesn't need the Ignoble Hierarch as much. I like that play a lot.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, there's a replacement Paladin.
And the other thing is the best reason to keep the Hierarch in hand would be for a turn 3 Yawgmoth, but that's turned off anyways because of the needles. So.
Mm-hmm.
Geist. Okay, make some blockers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, it doesn't take long for this Yawgmoth deck to flood the board with creatures that just none of them stand up to anything, but it's just so many of them. It's hard to get through. Ooh, well, Force of Vigor has something to say about Will's board position there.
Did Will really draw the 4th hammer? Or is that not third hammer? What he killed? He killed a hammer and something.
We killed the needle.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Will did draw the 3rd hammer. So I guess he's debating on whether or not he wants to cast it now or hold it. Okay, this makes sense because if you draw the 0 mana artifact, I think you're better off equipping the hammer and the Shadowspear rather than double hammer because you just go chump block and then minus the grist. So
sure. Well, there is Yawgmoth again for Mason at a full 20 life, it looks like.
Yeah, so now you just go sack the Geist, counter on the Paladin, probably sack the token, counter on the Geist. I think it's better to do it. It's just a free card, right? Counter on the Geist, and then essentially just sack the Geist again. You end up at the same spot, but just up an extra card. So
yeah, as long as you have the life to play with, there's really no reason not to do it that way.
Yeah. But I think we're still in a, from Mason's perspective, I still think Mason's in a fine spot here. So.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, Mr. Krueger.
Yeah, and you see Will just like really, really, once you get to this part of the game, especially because the needle is gone. So, and I believe Will only has 1 copy for the Saga. So you really have to maneuver around this Yawgmoth with. It's very, very tricky when you get to the spot of the game.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just if Will can force Mason to lose some of his important creatures, the undying creatures and such, then that's helpful, as we saw in the other game. But
right, just kind of like fight through the resources.
Yeah, exactly. So here is a Sigarda's Aid. That's always a threat. Nexus is in play. There's not enough mana for a flying Nexus to attack with a hammer, and Will is just going to pass the turn.
Yeah, and from here, you're just going to see Mason just deploy as many creatures as possible to give himself the most amount of Yawgmoth activations. Unless he just has the kill rolled up, which he might.
Okay,
I saw a cord in Mason's hand.
Attacks coming in. Will doesn't care. What is this? Just non-lethal damage? Pfft, get out of here. No problem.
And I think Mason should have lethal because you can go post-combat, cast Birds of Paradise, uptick Grist, make a token. That gives you 6 for cord for 3. You go cord for 3, get Messenger, sack the token, counter on the Geist, and then kind of go off from there.
Okay, well, instead, we're going to see Hushbringer pitched to the White March, which must be targeting Yawgmoth. The insect token gets sacrificed in response. to remove
put
the
a counter on the
from
Geist.
right. Okay.
Oh, okay. So the issue with this is now how are we getting to the Yawgmoth again? I think he has evolution. Yeah, he has evolution. Okay. I was gonna say if he didn't have evolution, he might have wanted to sacrifice the Geist, put a counter on maybe nothing just to get the Geist back, and then go Cord for the Yawgmoth. But with the evolution, this should be fine. So you just go
Yeah.
sack the Geist, counter, get the Yawgmoth, and then yeah, Will's basically in the same spot.
That is rough.
Yeah.
And yeah, can't get through it. So Mason Lange and Golgari Yawgmoth are going to come out on top in round 3. Okay, so coming back to us, our winners this round were Sam Kuprewicz and Mason Lange with Living End and Green Black Yawgmoth.